think about medicine. So if your, stomach is upset, you're going to go to a gastro. If you have a heart problem, you're going to go to a cardiologist. If you, so on and so forth. If your mental health is not well, you're going to see a psychiatrist. And that to me is the specific job of agencies in, brand and marketing side of things. They are experts of their specialties.
This is You Should Talk To, a podcast for busy marketing leaders who are looking for support and tips on getting shit done. In each episode, Daniel Weiner interviews marketing leaders and discusses their experience, successes, and failures around hiring agencies. If you're interested in finding and choosing the right agency partner, then let's jump in.
Hello and welcome to episode 3 of the You Should Talk To podcast. I am Daniel Weiner, and this podcast is still currently brought to you by myself and You Should Talk To, at least until a sponsor decides to pony up the big bucks, maybe after today and my awesome guest. You Should Talk To pairs brands and marketers for free with vetted agencies and or freelancers for marketing and tech needs. Why? Because finding great agencies are a pain in the ass. I'm super excited today to be joined by Bulbul Hooda, CMO of Vella Bio and also one of the companies that I've helped with a pretty robust social media agency search. Thank you so much for joining us, Bulbul.
Thank you for having me, Daniel.
Tell us a little bit about yourself. You've been at brands like L'Oreal, Unilever, and now you're at Vella. How did your career get you to this point so far? How'd we get here?
It's very interesting, actually. So mine was a quintessential beauty marketing career path, so to say. And I started working back in India, where I'm from. So I started my career at L'Oreal and from there to Unilever in India. And then I transitioned over to New York with Unilever, working across categories from the start, color cosmetics, skincare, and then eventually I ended up at Shiseido in the fragrances category. So kind of seen it all on the beauty side of things. And then due to some personal reasons, I had to relocate to Arizona, which was something that I hadn't anticipated. And I also hadn't anticipated that there will be almost zero career options for me here in Scottsdale. But I was meeting a lot of people and, the power of networking, I think it can really lead to so many great consequences as it did for me. I met someone who was heading marketing for Viagra back in the day when the company was based here. And she told me that the person who helped develop Viagra, who was the principal investigator, has made something for women, which is a topical product. And, there've been tests behind it and things looking great, but they are looking to position the product as a beauty or wellness offering, if you like, because, it's possible to bring it to market in a non-pharmaceutical way, unlike Viagra. So, she said, I don't know if you want to meet with them, see how it goes. Is this something that interests you? But I said, I don't know anything about sexual wellness or this category. She said,
Sure.
But you do know about beauty. So they know about sexual wellness and they got the product. Do you think you can help build a brand around it? And, one thing led to the other. And as I always say, that one should always take chances in life, because I'm so fortunate to be working with this group of people on this brand, Vella, and right here from Arizona.
Yeah, it's the power of networking too. I'm a firm believer in taking chances and risks as well, but also being open to as many conversations as humanly possible. Before we move on, tell us a little bit more specifically about what Vella is. It's not your average CPG product. To some, it's a little bit taboo and a little bit out there and stuff like that. Fill us in more around like what it is, who you target, and kind of like a little bit about the science around it.
So that's actually, you left me with a great segue. It is a taboo topic. It is not your quintessential CPG offering, which we are hoping to change with everything we do at Vella. It is a sexual wellness product. It's a scientific breakthrough, first of its kind, pre-play topical serum for helping women with arousal and orgasm. And this has been a challenge, from years, centuries. It's been overlooked because, one, the female anatomy has been very complicated for people to figure out. And I personally believe that it wasn't just necessary, because for women to have pleasure is not a natural consequence for women to procreate, unlike men. So this was, probably, I was shocked to hear that the last time there was a true breakthrough in female sexual health was the birth control pill in the 1960s. And I can even argue that I'm not sure if that was an innovation for women or also actually targeting men. So that said, this flagship product, I called it the sensual intelligence in a bottle because that's really what it was. Something that you can apply topically, and it helps women with a simple benefit, but so unachievable of pleasure. I thought there's such a great story here to tell. And why should it be taboo? Why can't we do things to normalize this? And therefore we built very intentionally this prestige brand around it, which builds aspiration, which brings these conversations to the forefront, which was integral to our DNA, really. And that we've been in the business for over a year now with just the flagship. And that led us to believe that there is so many white spaces, so many underserved subsegments within the sexual wellness landscape that we are bringing new innovations to market. In fact, in 2 weeks from now, talking to each of those underserved subsegments. And I still believe we are just scratching the surface. There is so much to do because, unfortunate as it is, but women and a lot of other subsegments have just been left behind in the pursuit of sexual health.
Sure. And coming from big brands like Unilever and L'Oreal and stuff like that, what's it been like being at, a smaller upstart brand? And also, to that end, like marketing a product that still is considered taboo, have you run into any roadblocks with like regulation or what you can say, or people freaking out about, this category in general? I know sex makes some people uncomfortable, so I'm sure you've run into some, I don't know, backlash is the right word, but interesting takeaways.
I think so. It's been a very steep and very gratifying learning curve these past 2 years. We started working together back in 2020, right in the dead center of the global lockdown, so to say, the infamous year, but it turned out to be so fruitful for us. So there were so many firsts, first of all, new city, new company, new category, all of that in one package. A new sort of situation, which was a global pandemic, which, brought with it so many uncertainties. The company was set up virtually, so I had never met my team members. In fact, I only ever met everybody in person this past June. So after 2 years of working together. So, somebody like in marketing, I've always been used to being in communication, being in constant touch. And, I'm a people's person. I need to have that level of connection. So the learning curve personally was, one was from a big company to a small company, but interestingly, it happened in the middle of the pandemic. So I'm working completely virtually, have never met the people I'm working with in person. And then there was the nuance of this category, which taught me so many things. So all the playbook was really basically thrown out of the window. Things that worked for beauty do not necessarily work for sexual wellness, even though we are striving to build a brand similar to in that prestige beauty and wellness space. Why? Because female pleasure is such a taboo in, talk about social media restrictions, Facebook, we cannot advertise anything on the platform. The website gets blocked out. We can't advertise. So social media channels for advertising were a complete no. Interest-based advertising was still open, so search played a big role in our success. Word of mouth, which, amplified as influencer marketing, played a huge organic content, influencer marketing. Emails are so critical for us. We have a base of about 80,000 email subscribers. And isn't that a telling sign that people are curious? They want to know about this category. They want to learn about products like this. So what we do is we found methods to sort of go around all the restrictions. What we will not do, and we did not, is compromise on the language and the aesthetic of the brand, because there has been so much misinformation about the category, so many nicknames given to anatomy, that shouldn't have been. And we realized that, guys, we are in 2021. This is no way to talk about, if we can't talk about it, how are we going to sell this? So we did not compromise on our, brand DNA, the brand ethos that vagina is a vagina and we are going to say it. And orgasm, whatever it takes, we're going to go ahead. It's uncomfortable, but that's the whole point. We have to make these uncomfortable conversations to, in the end, normalize it. So, it's been, like I said, a steep learning curve, both on marketing side of things, restrictions, but also the challenges of a startup versus a well-oiled conglomerate, where everybody's jobs are very defined and in very specific guardrails. But a person and it's a very personal preference. For me, I've recognized after spending 14 or 15 years in that side of things, I was preparing myself to do this. I don't think I can go back to the structure of a conglomerate again because I thrive in chaos. I love to find a method in the madness, which Vella's given me ample opportunity to. I don't think I'm the same marketer or the same person I was 2 years ago.
That's great. To that end, I know you talked about circumventing some of the things that were limiting, such as social or paid social at least, and things like that, to kind of move into the meat of how we got introduced to each other. Prior to getting in touch with me in your past career and also at Vella, when you needed help, when you needed a third party, when you needed an agency or a vendor for something, where were you typically going?
So actually, and this is also a very big debate about, so I'm a firm believer that agencies are, almost the backbone of the success of a brand and company.
Interesting. That's not the norm of what I get from most people when I ask that question.
No, I do believe it because, they are, how do you say, think about it in, I like this analogy a lot. Think about medicine. So if your, stomach is upset, you're going to go to a gastro. If you have a heart problem, you're going to go to a cardiologist. If you, so on and so forth. If your mental health is not well, you're going to see a psychiatrist. And that to me is the specific job of agencies in, brand and marketing side of things. They are experts of their specialties. So, and I can oversee everything. I've done everything, but I've never had the chance. There is just not enough time in a career to really become experts of every single aspects. So, as marketers, at best, we are generalists. And then to be able to find those specific subject matter experts, bring them together to, build that A-team. And I can say, given the successes Vella has just seen over the past 2 years, I will not shy away from saying that it's a huge part contribution of the agency partners we work with. So, that's 100% true.
That's great. I think part of the reason I get differing, I completely agree with you to a certain extent. I think a lot of it is a tagline I've been using a lot lately is finding an agency is easy, finding the right agency is really hard. I think a lot of brands that I speak with just don't search long enough, truthfully. They end up giving in to agencies that they're not super thrilled about, at least on the front end, just because they don't want to have, 10 more conversations, even though it may yield finding the perfect fit for them.
Yeah, no, I would disproportionately invest time in finding because, it's not just about one part is, of course, a big sanity check is their expertise. But then there's also synergies with, your leadership style, but also your company. Are there shared values and things like that? So to answer a question, before we met, I was going back to a lot of, past experiences because having worked with 3 big companies, one has been in contact with very many agencies. So people, and things sometimes in that moment, you may or may not be working with an agency, but something stays with you. So I went back to some of those. I also leveraged my network, like I said, power of network, people who are currently working on other brands, my colleagues, my friends, peers, that who are you, which is your agency? Do you recommend them? And, be candid, give me frank feedback. So I did meet a lot of people and I think some of them were even good. But the challenge was that, what we were building at Vella, and as a marketer, my job is to have that pristine clarity of vision of where am I going? And we were building this unique positioning for Vella, which sort of meets at the intersection of scientific prowess and prestige wellness. And it's a sweet spot that never existed before. So like I said, I had to throw away my playbook, but so did the agencies.
Sure.
This category did not exist before. So I think a lot of the shortcomings were coming from that, there was no place to reference that how do we pitch this company? And that really was my pain point more than anything else, that I think they were great in what they were doing. This was just something new that was never experienced before.
Sure. There's something you said a few minutes ago that I wanted to point out as well that I completely agree with. Like, all of these agencies as well, and I talk about it a lot, is it's as much personality as anything else. Like, you do take a little bit of a leap of faith, and like a common negative I hear about agencies is, oh, you get pitched by the A team and then you get turned over to, the B team or something like that. But again, on the front end, like, it is a leap of faith. You trust the people that you're talking to, but you don't even get to do the work if you don't like the people, So like on the front end, it is fortunately or unfortunately, depending on how you look at it, a little bit of a popularity contest and a leap of faith that like once the work actually starts, it's going to be aligned with what you've been sold to. To that end, like you talked to, if I remember correctly, like 10 to 15 agencies prior to us starting our process together, which is a lot of conversations. That's probably 10 or 15 hours and some follow-ups of your life. Talk me through that process a little bit. Like with those, however many you talk to on the front end, does something stick out at you of like why it felt like, none of those were potentially the right fit for you all?
Before we chatted or after our process began?
Before we chatted, the agencies that you found on your own and stuff like that.
Yeah. So, a big part, and I pride myself in that intuition. So there are two parts, right? So after being in the industry for 15 years, 14 years, when we started the process, and then second part is intuition. I can understand very quickly because, I'm getting to an agency because I want to benefit from their expertise. I know that I'm paying a premium for this compared to building an in-house team. And in a large conglomerate, I'll probably be doing both. There'll be an internal team that we will be building and, upskilling. And at the same time, there'll be external third-party agencies. In a small company, in a startup, you just don't have either the luxury of time to train and build an internal team or the money to waste in inexperienced agency partners or something that doesn't click. So, credentials aside, I need to look at you in your face and talk to you my intuition will tell me if this is going to be a good fit or not based on, do you understand the brief? Because a lot of times, agencies, and again, I am a believer in agencies, but I can write probably a long letter about all the shortcomings that they need to also, zero in on, because there is always room for improvement, as it is as much for us, as much, for any company. So what I have personally been very put off with is a cookie cutter approach presented to me, specifically after I have invested the time to write you a long brief, write you exactly what my goals are, tell you where this company is and what are we trying to build, a short-term vision and a long-term vision. So it almost felt like I have wasted my time putting through the effort, and then somebody on the agency side just thought, oh, this is great. We can just repurpose the presentation we had on Thursday for client C for Vella. And that's been my biggest pain point, was like, this is not working. And in the end, it left me with like, are you being serious right now? Come on,
Sure. Is there a way, before we get to once we started working together, how can an agency stand out, in your opinion, during the sales process or prior to actually engaging? What puts an agency on the map with you and gets you to say yeah, I'm really impressed with what they put forward? Because what I get from the other side, from agencies oftentimes is, we don't want to put in too much work and effort before we know more of, what's going on and having some conversation and stuff. So a common feedback I get from brand marketers regarding discovery calls is oh, they didn't come in with 50 million questions, or they didn't seem as prepared as we would have liked. Conversely, coming from agency side, we used to have, a lot of conversation about well, we don't want to come to the table with too much, because if it's not aligned with what they're looking for, we're going to get disqualified. So we're always looking for a happy medium. But in your opinion, what can an agency do to stand out?
I think, so I'm going to first start with an analogy. So as a marketer, sure, my end user, my customer, is the person who's going to buy my product. And I will leave no stone unturned to find a way to get to my customer. whatever it takes. I'm going to try advertising. I'm going to try organic content. I'm going to try word of mouth, sampling, emails, mailers, you name it. I will find a way that I'm not retargeting. I'm not missing out on any customer. Likewise, I think from an agency's perspective, their customer is the client. And that intention, when that is missing, I love an agency when they come prepared, when they've done their homework. It's not so hard. There is so much information available, just secondary data. Figure out what you're talking about. You don't need to be experts of my category, but show me that you're experts of what you know and how you can fit this to what I'm looking for. My biggest thing is read the brief, because you provide a big template for us to fill. And what is most frustrating is when the pitch comes back, I was like, did anybody even open the email? Because if you did, at least these will not be your first 3 slides, at least not that. So I think internalizing your cookie cutter approach does no longer exist. For us as marketers, no 2 customers are the same. It's the world we live in. It's customization and personalization. And I feel it's the same from an agency's perspective. No 2 companies are the same. They're definitely not looking for the exact same solutions. I got a weird, and I get a lot of pitches from various agencies through LinkedIn.
I can imagine.
And I feel like the approach is all wrong. So there's one specific one, which, and normally they straight away go to trash. So, I'm saying it here so that if don't waste your time, I'm not reading those. Sometimes those are copy paste in a way that the eager salesperson has even forgotten to change the name to my name. So I get emails, generic emails. But the specific one that got my goat was, first of all, already assuming that I don't know what I'm doing. So you're telling me, you haven't thought about this. No, trust me, this is our business. We have thought about it. So don't tell me, we haven't, we have. And the second was, I'm going to pitch you something. If you like it, we can work together. If you don't, I'll let you steal my ideas. No, I'm not interested in stealing your ideas. Thank you very much. Sure. And I never respond to this kind of junk. But this one, I specifically took the liberty to, and I was saying, thank you for taking the time to reaching out. Trust me, we have thought of all the things that you have not even approached yet. And second, we have a fantastic agency partner and a creative team in-house. So we assure you we don't have any interest in stealing your ideas. I hope it landed the message, but it's what
did they reply to that?
Yeah, something, or, I'm sorry I offended you. Yes, you did. And now you've lost your chance. Or like there are these agency pitches that come to me with, a video embedded in an email, or like, do you really think I have the time to see the video that you're blasting out to 10,000 people at the same time? I don't. Don't waste your time,
Yeah. As somebody who was at an agency for 7.5 years, I've done every cringeworthy sales practice at some point in my life, but quickly learned many, many years ago that you really can't. You have to, in my opinion, think long term to be in, and there's not necessarily even like a quote unquote real sales position at many agencies. It's done by, the founders and stuff like that doing sales, but you really just cannot be successful, in my opinion, unless you're playing the long-term game in agency world. Some of the relationships I have today were built literally 8-10 years ago and are just now coming to fruition because I haven't tried selling to them and have, genuinely been a resource. I joke that I was unintentionally building my business for, the last decade and didn't realize it. But no, it's interesting to hear that for sure.
I think the first thing an agency should do is help build some trust and credibility. And without trust, Daniel, we've worked together and, you found me the right solution for me. So you have bought my trust for life. So tomorrow when I'm looking for another agency, I know that you took the time to hear me out. You know what I'm looking for. And if you are introducing me to someone, it's going to be credible. So I think trust is the most important thing that, in your 15 minutes presentation, even if you don't want to put in a lot of effort, at least find a way to sell me your trust. Tell me that I can, these are people who know what they are doing. And that oftentimes in that lazy approach that why should we put too much effort before we get the account, I think that's what is missing if you can really boil it down to that.
Sure. No, first of all, I appreciate that. Thank you. I'm glad I've come off as trustworthy. It's funny you bring that up too, because if I remember correctly, and it's funny, like, generally when I'm talking about the agencies that I work with, and I work with like 60 or so agencies now to varying capacities, people are like, oh, are your agencies perfect? And I'm like, no, like they make mistakes just as well. Like I like to think they're reasonably nice people. They all, do good work. I would never recommend anybody that I didn't think was wildly capable. However, to that point, if I remember correctly, I introduced you to 3 agencies. You ended up hiring 1, but I do recall one of them, who I won't name here, immediately was disqualified. And if I remember correctly, because they just didn't listen, I believe part of the ask in the brief was like, we're really happy with our creative. We don't want to focus on like changing up our brand and the creative. And I believe your feedback was within like 5 minutes, pardon my French, they shit all over the creative. So to that end, like, 98% of my job is like just communication in general. So to hear that, I'm like, I take a painstaking amount of effort on my end to work with people like yourself and brands and understand their needs. And to hear that, I'm like, oh my God, like, I gave this to you on a silver platter. So we'll cross them off. But, in regards to like the agency that you did end up hiring, and I believe another one made it to roughly a later round when you were speaking to only a few agencies, like what ultimately stood out? If I remember, like price was relatively comparable. It wasn't, some crazy variance and you picked them because they were cheap or anything like that. Like what ultimately stood out to you and ended up winning your business?
I think the intention. So just the legwork that the team put together before meeting us, and they went above and beyond. They did and it's very easy in today's world, but people don't do that. They went that extra mile. They did a survey with our demographic. So they picked it from the brief and they went ahead and interviewed people in that category, women in that category. At that time, it was a women targeted product. So that already like checked a big box on me that, okay, so they did not know about the category and they went ahead and, did this 1-week survey to come back with some learnings and substantiate their hypotheses with data. I'm a data-driven person, as much as I love the magic, there is something to be said, the balance between poet and peasants, as you call it. So
art and science, both of them together in perfect harmony.
Exactly. So I really appreciated all the legwork. What stood out to me is that they took the time to read the long brief, and it was long. I'm guilty of that.
You'd be surprised how many marketers I work with who do not have a brief, an outline, anything. And I have an intake document where I encourage people to do that, but I think that's the first step in success. Even if it ends up changing, just seeing your thought process on paper is just so crucial. I think for folks like you as well to evaluate agency partners apples to apples. If you just go in and have like wildly open-ended conversations, typically they're all going to be positive-ish, but you'll get back like a huge variance in the scope as well as the budget. And it's generally not helpful for you if you get back, 3 proposals at 50 grand, 500 grand, and $1 million. How do you evaluate those?
So this was my first lesson in marketing when I first started as a young assistant brand manager in L'Oreal. We would meet a lot of agency or freelancers, and when the product would come back, my first boss taught me my most important lesson, that go back to the brief because it's crap in, crap out. So if your brief is not good enough, don't expect wonders. They're acting off of the brief. So and I hope everybody did, but in my career, I've met people who've read the brief. So I'm committed to making, my vision on paper crystal clear. Like there will be no ambiguity, because sometimes so much is lost in conversations. Maybe you didn't understand me. Maybe I was using metaphors. Maybe don't leave that to chance. This is the single most important thing. It's a big expense for the company. Respect the process and respect the responsibility the company has in you, that, you can deliver. So I would take the time to write a very detailed brief, and, what gets written gets done. So that's the start point. You invest, and marketers today don't, especially the younger kids. I see that's like, where is the brief? I want to, even if it's a small like TikTok video, if you don't tell the influencer or the creator, what do you want from, what do you want to achieve? What is it you want them to say? They can't imagine this. They can't do this on their own unless you are crystal clear. So I would go as detailed as, these are the angles we want to shoot. This is what you must say. This is the place where you could bring in your own style. And then after that detailed process is when, so this is something that stood out with the partners we picked, is that they went through the pains of not only internalizing it, they also made sure that they presented ideas that went above and beyond the brief. So they stuck to the brief, they delivered on that, but then additionally, like, also have you considered basket, which, a lot of times is very helpful because it's not humanly possible for one person in this situation, me, to consider, all the avenues. And that's where it comes back to, I'm paying for the expertise of their agency. So that's where, the extra, the garnishing that they bring in is more than welcome.
Sure. That's a good segue into my next topic. Like, I've seen a huge shift, especially since COVID, of big brands especially, but brands of all shapes and sizes moving more towards like 1 to 2, or agencies that are specialized in like 1 to 2 services versus looking for like a full service offering and stuff like that. Do you have an opinion on that? Are you looking for more specialized agencies? I don't even know how many agencies you work with in total, but like, I find in general, it's just really hard to find like a full service agency who does everything, really, really, really well, which is kind of the shtick of what I do. Even when agencies tell me like, oh, we're full service, I'm like, cool. But like, what do you do? What are the 2 or 3 things you do best? Because surely you can't do 50 things, the best. What are your opinions there?
Yeah, no, I'm very skeptical of this. So this full service agency has never worked in the history of my experience, but also everybody I speak to. It's not possible for a group of people to be excellent at everything. So if we are paying for the expertise, we have a very specific white space that we are wanting to fill with said agency. So I actually think this is a very faulty sales pitch from their end, that we are full service, we do everything. No, you don't. You can't.
Sure.
Then I'm going to get into, okay, what are the kind of people you hire? Where do you hire them from? What is the experience of each of the people that you have on the team? Because if that be the case, then like I said, they would just be another generalist, but I am the generalist and there can only be one who can supervise, subject matter experts. So please come to tell me what is your one specific, what sets you apart from your competitors. So yeah, it's the full service pitch is lost on me, to be honest. And maybe it works for some other companies.
Sure. Can you think of 2 questions here? A super positive experience with agency and what made that so great? And on the opposite side, without impugning anybody, can you think of like a really negative agency experience you've had and what made that so negative?
So positives are so many. Like I said, I'm a firm believer on a true partnership, and I consider my agency partners as part of my team. It's what makes us together an A team. So many positive. Most recently, we've championed 2 social media campaigns with the agency partner, and I'm just saying them because they're most recent, but there are so many experiences like this.
And do you find it's positive? Because I have kind of an unpopular opinion. My is that the work doesn't matter. And what I mean by that is like, work is subjective, all that sort of stuff. Like typically what I find good experiences with agencies are like process driven and, like genuinely caring about your business, stuff like that. The work cannot suck by any means. But again, like, are most of your positive experiences, do you tie them back to like the people or like the actual physical work?
Well, they're connected. So I tie it back to people because it's the people who are listening and they're bringing intention to the table is what translates into work. Work doesn't happen without people. So my best experiences are when, in the wake of just the economic climate at the moment, we had to reconsider our retainer models across all agency partners. And a common misconception I had was if we do that, the quality of the work will suffer. But it did not. This is what I call a true partnership. When I'm thinking of them as part of my team, and I was like, guys, this is the situation we are in. We'll have to reconsider the retainer at this point, and this is where I can sort of pull back, but this is where I need you to step up. They came through in a way. And then after that shift of retainer is actually one of my most memorable campaigns that they delivered. So, just
great.
Testimony of the fact that the work, not only did it not suffer, but actually it was doubling up on the intent they brought to the table. So ultimately the measurability of it is the work product. So I can't ignore the work, but I think the experience was with people to not only understand that, okay, this is the new situation we are in, and not compromise the quality of the work that they were delivering. I thought that was pretty incredible. And, I'm their fan for that.
And what about a negative experience? Can you think of one of those?
Negative experiences were also, I guess, well, one could call it both process and people, sometimes very big agencies, and have had experience with those in my past life. They tend to get very hierarchical. And I don't think, it's just so much time is wasted in protocol, and then, which designation talks to which designation on the client side, and, and then so-and-so is coming in. So is so-and-so going to be in the meeting? It's irrelevant. It's, I guess now, if anything, we should sort of, I don't say do away with the titles, but like know that, which are the really important people you need in the room for the work to get done. How do you say, let the egos not be bigger than the projects? It's really been all my buckets of bad experiences, or just like taking too much time when it doesn't need to. You don't need to. Sometimes if a client is getting to you, so people are not unreasonable at a root level. If something is coming up on an emergency basis, know that, more often than not, it is actually an emergency. So step up your game, because now is the moment for you to shine. Don't then say that it's going to take 3 or 4 weeks timeline, because for example, social media, let's take that. Everything is so contextual. It's something is trending today. So it doesn't help me if you're going to say that it'll take 7 working days to bring you back a product, because in 7 working days, the trend has changed. It's no longer needed. So that's been sort of the pool of frustrations, if you like, the egos and the delays. Sometimes it's understandable, but sometimes it's not, which is what is frustrating.
Do you think that those negative experiences can be salvaged, or is it usually like once that distrust is kind of placed, it's really hard to get back to a good spot?
My own view on this one is people's mindsets have to change. And oftentimes big companies, both on the agency side, but also equally on the manufacturing side, and this is my industry, so I'm sure it's true for every industry, the mindset that we've always done it like this has to change. Because the world is not the same. The landscape is not the same. Your customer is not the same. The ways you meet the customer is not the same. So your traditional habits, and mostly it's, these bad practices are helmed from the top. I don't think the people you recruit new from the industry or new from fresh out of college have the same mindset or the shared vision, but ultimately the company's ethos are designed by people on the top. And people on the top, by virtue of being there, have been around for a long time. They're in the mindset that we've only ever done it like this. I think that has to change. So it can be salvaged. But what happens is, from a client perspective, because I already know these pitfalls, I actually prefer to work with smaller boutique agencies, newer people, younger people, because I know that they will bring, what they lack in their experience, they will fill in with their intention and with their willingness to work with us, their expertise.
Sure. Nah. And then the last marketing related question before we get into a couple fun ones. This could be either work related or just like the overall weird, you alluded to it, economic climate and all that. What keeps you up at night, regarding Vella? What's on your mind from a marketing standpoint?
So, economic climate aside, because we thankfully are pretty well oiled. We have, there is a lot of faith in the company and there is money behind us. What really keeps me up at night is, will our supply chain and, support the rapid innovation that we want to bring to the market? Because especially global supply chains are pretty stressed out. Things are expensive. So oftentimes your shipping cost is higher than your cargo cost, actually, because fuel prices are off the charts. So yeah, not really marketing related, but supply chain is something that I do worry about, that, we can have the blueprint to grow. We can have the ideas to grow, but can we support this with as rapid a supply chain, especially post the pandemic? Things are just what took 3 months earlier now takes at least 9 to 10 months from a global supply chain perspective.
It's crazy. Well, I hope you get some sleep soon regarding the supply chain. What was your very first job?
My very first job, actually, isn't it funny, was at an advertising agency. So
there you go. You were holding out on me this whole time.
yeah, so this was back in college. And like I said, I was born and raised in India. So, summer jobs and this concept was not very common back in the day. And I also went to college many, many moons ago. But I was an economics major in school. So I don't know why. I was very intrigued. So I was always intrigued. I didn't know I want to be a marketer. I didn't know any of this, but I was obsessed with watching ads on television at that time. I was less interested in the content, but more interested in the ads that fill in the time. And so I thought, this is where I see a career for me. And actually 2 summers, we had long summer breaks back in school. I went to a very big agency. I don't know if I'm supposed to name them or not, but they're office based in India. And I worked there each summer at a very low stipend, but those were the best memories I have. And so a lot of the times when I say that I know what goes in the minds of the agency, it's probably also my conditioning from a very young age. I've seen it from that side as well. So I understand it.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting when I talk to folks who have both agency and brand experience, usually have like a wildly different perspective than somebody who's worked just on the brand side.
Yeah.
I couldn't imagine you ever end up on death row, but if you did, what would your final meal be?
My final meal, gosh, I love all food.
I need to start asking people what they would end up on death row for before doing that. So hopefully that's not the case.
It's probably going to be pancakes with a lot of syrup.
Pancakes, interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Nothing in the pancakes, just regular pancakes.
I mean, Nutella, some chocolate chips, some berries.
I was gonna say I'm a blueberry kind of guy if I'm going pancakes.
I'm a breakfast sort of a person. Breakfast at all meals. So yeah, it would be pancakes dinner.
Okay, fair enough. And then my final question for you: who's someone who inspires you?
Someone who inspires me. So not to sound philosophical, but I think inspirations always change as you evolve and grow in time. So I've had different inspirations at different points in my life. At this moment, I think I'm very inspired by our 4 founders at Vella, because they are my immediate circle of influence at the moment. And I'm blown away every day with the expertise they bring to the table, each one with their own characteristics. And, they each have what I don't. So we come from very varied fields, and to then see that how everything comes together and works in this beautiful brand that is out in the market inspires me every day.
That's awesome. No, that's the best team situation you can find. So that sounds wonderful. Bulbul, this was awesome. I appreciate you spending some time with me today. I presume the best spot, I'm going to not give your LinkedIn out, and I'm going to tell people not send you messages on LinkedIn since those end up in trash. But I believe the URL is vellabio.com, right?
That's correct.
VELLABIO.com for more information on what's going on over there. And I really appreciate you joining us. This was awesome.
Thank you, Daniel, for having me, and good luck. You're doing a great service to us marketers, so keep up the good work.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I will talk to you soon.
Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you for checking out this episode of You Should Talk To. This show is brought to you by the company with the same name, You Should Talk To, a company that helps marketing leaders find the right agency or freelancer for their situation. If you enjoyed what you learned in this episode, make sure to follow You Should Talk To wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts, or visit YouShouldTalkTo.com for more information.